Order. And I'd like to ask, if he would, before we start, if Representative Nix would please open our meeting with prayer, please.
Okay, let's pray. Lord, we're so thankful that we live in a country where we can come together to discuss the needs and concerns that we have, Lord, in an open process to pass legislation. Father, just pray that you would grant us your wisdom, your mercy, your kindness today as we debate these measures, and that we will do the thing that you would have us to do. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. I'd like to, in our audience today, do we have anyone who's a teacher out there? Raise your hand. Any teachers? Any students out there? Raise your hand. All right, stand up and tell us where you're from. Come on, I love you. I love students. You going to be a teacher? Oh, why? Why? Oh, good. Good. All right. Whose district do you live in? Whose district? Yeah. Where do you live? What county? Right here. Okay, honey. We'll help you out. Is your representative here today? Okay, that's good. All right. Anybody else, this is your first time with us? We'd like to just raise anybody else your first time with us. Where a principal? Who is it? Margaret? Stand up. Come on. Where are they? Stand up. Tell us who you are. I want to tell y'all something. Still, if you have, I plan to have this. I'm going to do it right now. We're going to come. You're going to commit to us. We're planning to visit that school. What, 3,000 students now? You said K through 12. One of the finest virtual schools I've ever visited. Man, they really make it happen. I am so proud of what they're doing. That school is blowing it away, blowing it away. And I want to have a meeting out there one day and let us just see how it's going on. It blew my mind. The day I was there, they were having a field trip. Now, let me tell you, they had arranged it online, and the parents, they were at Fernbank, and all the kids were there, and the parents, I thought, man, that's the kind of field trip I want to take kids on. It was just wonderful what they were doing. So I commend you. We're glad to have you with you. Anyone else, this is your first time? Now, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to take a point of personal privilege. I am so excited today because I'm going to tell you, granddaddies, grandparents, you know, we love our grandchildren. And I'm so happy today to have my grandson here. Patrick, stand up, buddy. I'm going to embarrass you a little bit. Isn't he a good-looking boy? That's my grandson, Patrick. He was paging for us today, and I am so thankful that he took after my wife's side of the family and his looks. I tell you. But got all his hair. That's right. Tom said he's got the good hair, too. He sure did. Got the good hair. I like. But I'm glad to have him. He's going to help us out today. So I'd like for you to look in your on your folders just a second. I'd like for you to notice that over here on February the 21st, look in your folder, MAC Day, 2014. Please go by. They're having in Capitol 216 a breakfast with members of the General Assembly. And it's a great opportunity for Education Committee members just to meet and mingle with representatives of the House and Senate Education Committee. This is from the Chamber. Metro Chamber is doing it. And so please come by. We'd like to invite you. Also look in there. I want you to look at the second thing in your folder, that we're having our House Education Joint and Senate Luncheon. And this will be on February the 26th. It's sponsored, Georgia Chamber of Commerce is going to be sponsoring it. It's in 133, the Capitol Building, so please come by and have lunch. It's for you. And I think also, Sheena, there's a dinner. Is that in here, the dinner?
Not yet, because it's not till March.
All right, the dinner's in March. We'll talk about that later. But those things you keep, is there anything else that I haven't covered? Sheena, is that about it? Okay, good. All right. Anybody have a question before we start? We have a long agenda, and I ask you, please stay with us. Ron, we're going to do your bill last because I want to keep you here. But I may call it early if you tried to leave, if you decided to leave. All right. At this time, I'd like to ask our vice chair, if he would, to assign the new bill. So yours is number 21. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're getting late in the session, so there's not that many new bills. All right. Late in the session, not that many new bills. We have Senate Bill 329, the Work-Based Learning Act. This is essentially the exact same bill we already passed with Representative Lumsden. So because we've already done that bill, basically word for word, we're going to put that into full committee for Senate Bill 329. We won't hear that until after day 30. House Bill 1006 by Representative Morgan. So going to go to Academic Innovations. House Bill 1006, Representative Morgan, Academic Innovations. House Bill 964 by Representative Lindsay, also to Academic Innovations. Those are only two new bills. I will point out, Mr. Chairman, that the bills related to the local superintendent election, House Bill 519 and House Resolution 550, will be heard early next week in Academic Achievement.
Okay, so we'll
That's
get
it.
those. So, all right, any questions on bill assignments? What, 12, okay? You're, did you mash?
Representative Lindy's bill number is 964.
964, okay. Any questions from the committee members? All right, we have a really lengthy agenda, and again, I urge you to stay with us. Some very important pieces of legislation, and I want you to hear. So, the first bill we're going to have is House Resolution 1186 by Representative Guy Singer. Is here? If there he is, okay.
Thank
And
you,
this came out of what committee?
What's that?
What committee did this come out of?
Came out of academic achievement,
All right,
and we recommend it do pass.
all right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Resolution 1186, LC 286988. Mr. Chairman, what we're doing in this resolution, it's a very simple one. We're requesting the Board of Education and the State Department of Education to impose as a requirement for high school graduation a successful completion of Skills for Success financial literacy class. As I made note of, this is a recommendation, and what this simply does, these skills include, but are by no means limited to, the ability to write a resume, the ability to conduct job interviews, an understanding of the importance of good work ethics, the ability to balance a checkbook and maintain checking and savings accounts, the understanding for the needs for and how to purchase life, home, automobile, health, and other insurances, the application of the proper use of debit and credit cards, and other debt instruments, the ability to read and understand contracts, an understanding and the importance of budgeting, savings, planning, and the for their financial futures, and an understanding of how government works at the local, county, state, and national level. And hopefully they're teaching that today in civics, but since we don't teach cursive anymore, I'm not sure we're teaching that in civics. Basically, an understanding of the importance of voting and an understanding of the soft skills needed for hireability.
All right, do I have any questions? Anyone have a question? All right, 27, if you'll, I'll try to, all right, Mike, 27, that's Representative Morgan, all right?
Just a quick question. I think it's a matter of process, really. I remember a few years ago we had a policy on the committee that we wouldn't direct the department on curriculum issues. And so I'm just wondering, did we change that, or what's our practice at this point?
Well, it's been our policy to try not to legislate curriculum, and as a resolution, we're just recommending. It's a resolution. It's not a law, and we're not passing.
Okay, so because it's a resolution, then we're...
Yeah, it's a resolution.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
All right, 25.
If the school system, of course this is non-binding, but if a school system is already teaching all of these things already within their curriculum, then there would be nothing else they would need to do. This is just expressing the will of the General Assembly that we hope they're doing these things.
That is correct.
Okay.
One of the failings I think that we have is that we think every student should go to college. And you know as well as I do that all the students won't go to college. They are not capable of going to college for whatever reason. But what we need to do is give them some basics that in many cases they are not getting at home. And in some cases I have learned the parents, when the student learns how to do these things and others, the parents end up learning from them.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Nix, you remember in your 186, I think it was, soft skills and all that was so critical, and that was one thing they stressed. Is that not correct?
That is correct. I was going to make the comment that we had that bill a couple of years ago. House Bill 186 covered just about everything that you've got here.
That's it, covered it all.
Especially the soft skills. We talked about that. We talked about the financial literacy. So Those are out there. I think the Department of Education will tell you that they are working on implementing those right now.
All right. Representative Dudgeons, in your committee, was there any conflict or anything, any comment you want to
No,
make?
Mr. Chairman, we pointed out because it leaves it up to the state board, they could figure out how to incorporate it into the requirements.
Okay. All right, any other questions? I see no questions, so at this time, do I have a motion?
Motion.
I have a motion. What is your motion?
Motion do pass.
Do pass. All right, do I have a second? I have seconds all over the place. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. All opposed, aye. Passes. It's yours. Take it away.
Thank
All
you,
right,
Mr. Chairman.
All right. Now, at this time, I think this is a very critical one, and we want to spend I'd like for everybody to please stay now. This is very critical, and I want you to listen. Do you want to stay up here, or do you want to go down?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to stay here with have all my
Because you have all your materials.
and,
At this
my-
time, I'd like to call House Bill 897 by Representative Dudgeons, and this came out of, Mr. Representative Nix, your committee. What was the recommendation out of committee?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I believe it was about a lifetime ago on February the 10th when we took that bill up.
Right, okay.
And we passed it out with a due pass recommendation from the Academic Support Committee.
All right. And, all right, now what, if you would, Representative Dudgeons, give us the number where we'll have it. And I think you have a talking points here, so if you would get us all oriented and ready.
I killed many trees, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
So we're working off House Bill 97 LC 33 5528S. There will be a fairly lengthy amendment, AM 33 1384. And I think it's there's also a two-pager document, which is just, it says February 9th is my mistake. Front and back document, I'm sorry, which is just the section-by-section summary of what we're doing in the bill. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm ready when you are.
So I'd like to ask members of the committee, if they would, if you feel when he's on a section that you really want to ask a question, I will allow that. So let me see your light. But if you don't have a question, we'll move on. At the end, we'll try to take questions. But since this is so lengthy, I will take questions after each section. So, okay. Representative Dudgeons, if you will, start.
All righty. Turn me on. I'm turned on. All right. And I'm going to comment on the amendment as I go by. So if I hit a section which is affected by the amendment, I want to go ahead and hit it so we just kind of get an integrated picture of what we're doing. Section 1 actually was a bill that Representative Chuck Sims dropped. It's repealing a Population Act, which just a code cleanup issue. Section 2 and many other sections like it just accomplish one purpose. When the code was written many years ago, it used the word curriculum for what the state is supposed to be doing. And in education over the past 10, 15 years, we've moved to a different model where the state is setting standards and the locals are developing curriculum. So we simply went through the entire code as a cleanup issue and reflected in the code what we're really doing today, which is the state is doing standards and locals are doing curriculum. So we did that all over the place. However, the amendment, you'll notice if you got the amendment, the first 4 lines of the amendment is to replace the word state mandated content standards with just content standards. This language will mirror language in the substitute to Senate Bill 167, which I believe will be heard in Senate Education tomorrow, is my understanding. This is a bill related to standards development, data sharing, and the Common Core. And in order to make sure that all the language was consistent when we're talking about the same thing, decision was made to use that terminology. But again, the purpose of all these modifications was just to reflect in the code as a typical Title 20 cleanup, what are we doing today in the real world. So that's Section 2 and many other ones. Section 3 is also that same clarifying that what the school system is doing, state board doing standards. But the important lines 55 to 57 are important, basically saying, making it very clear that this local school system will get their own curriculum. And at 53 and 54, it points out that the state may set standards, but locals are free to expand or enrich them any way that they seem necessary.
I want to just emphasize and have Representative Dudge emphasize one thing we heard everywhere we traveled was that locals do curriculum, select materials, and that's what you're stressing right here, right?
That's correct. So that would be Section 3. Section 4. In 2012, we passed 2 bills, one by Representative Cassis and one by Senator Rogers, related to online learning. And they had two different processes for our online courses were going to be sort of basically listed and certified and so forth. And I'll say it because he's here, but we struck Senator Rogers' version and used Senator Cassis's version. We had two very parallel code sections there in Section 4 is what we were doing. That was requested by the department related to just cleaning up how they're handling online courses. They have the online clearinghouse. It's up and published on their website. This just gives them a little bit less paperwork. All right. Section 5 is sitting there now in the bill. The amendment will strike Section 5. Oh, I'm sorry. I missed part of the amendment. On line 61 in Section 3, there's some concern about adding the line science and social studies on 61. So that's just going to be taken out. We're just going to leave it the way it is. That was part of a code cleanup, but it caused some concern, and so we're going to leave it out. Section 5, again, substitute to 167 in the Senate. Senator Ligon's bill has a very lengthy rewrite of Section 141 as far as reviewing standards. In anticipation of that bill, we did not want to have two conflicting code sections. So my amendment is just going to strike Section 5. All we did there in Section 5 of my bill was just clean up the wording again, but since there's going to be a lengthy rewrite being considered by the General Assembly, we did not want to have conflicting code sections. So my amendment will strike Section 5. Section 6, another one of just the clarifying the standards versus curriculum. Section 7, there's some paperwork requirement around a first grade readiness program that the state has to do by law, but they said that it's not really being used, and it still doesn't change anything about how our requirement, just getting rid of paperwork. That's one thing we've been pretty diligent about past few years is that if there's reports that are required that are going nowhere and not providing value, we're just trying to lighten the load on our states so that we don't have to have a lot of paperwork. All right, Section 8 caused a little bit of confusion with some people. Got some interesting emails around it. It's around the middle grades program. If you recall, on the QB Study Commission in 2011-2012 recommended, we used to have two funding levels, middle grades and middle school. And you had the higher level of funding, which you only got if you met a certain definition of how you did your middle school. And that was, and what we found was 80 to 90% of the schools were doing this, getting the funding. And it was this big paperwork thing again, where they were having to prove they were doing this and all this back and forth. So in 2012, we actually gave everybody, and the budget's done it now, everybody gets the higher funding level without having to jump through all the hoops. But the middle grades program definition was still left in the code, and so all we're doing here is just getting rid of that. Now, the reason it was left in the code is because, by technicality of how the law was written in 2012, a virtual school was still having to prove that it did all these things for middle school, which doesn't really make any sense for a middle school. For a virtual school anyway. So just by clarifying it, everybody gets it. We can just strike that out of the code. It doesn't say we don't like how middle schools are being done. We're just leaving it to the locals to do how they want to do. They're all doing it the way that the state suggested anyway, and that's all we're doing with the middle grades program.
And Representative Judge, one thing we want to be sure everybody knows, it did not say a thing about those planning periods.
That's right. That's correct.
That's up to you.
That's totally up to the locals. That's correct. Section 9 is 10 and 11. And Section 12 are simply changing the word competencies/curriculum to standards. Section 13 is where actually the old definition of the funding level. If you look on lines 308 and 312, you see that the middle school program is 1.13 funding ratio and the middle grades 1.01, striking out the lower funding level. So the news here is everybody gets more money, so everybody should be happy with that. So they're striking that out of the code. Section 14, again, taking out the language there. Section 15, taking out the middle grades language. And Section 16, taking out the middle grades language. Amazing what we're doing there. All right, Section 17, another cleanup on standards versus curriculum. Section 18 was taken out in subcommittee. It was referring to the master teacher program. That caused a lot of angst. We were trying to reflect the fact that unfortunately right now there is no funding for it. The race top funding for it is gone. And we tried to clean up the code that things we're not funding we don't put in, but we were kind of premature on that. I know that Kelly Henson, the PSC, has reported they're going to move over the next couple of years to a better, stronger, faster master teacher program that I'm sure he could discuss at length. But for now, we're going to leave the master teacher program in the code and not worried about it. So 18 is gone. Section 19 is related to professional development stipends. There's a lot of concern about this, and we actually repealed the sort of governing section of the code in 2012. Again, that's something that's not funded at the state level. This was generated more as a cleanup than anything else. As I talked to Kelly and some other people about it, it doesn't prevent the federal and local from supplementing professional development. It doesn't prevent any board from doing anything that way. Again, we're just trying to clean up parts of the code where we're saying we're doing things that aren't being done. Section 20 was requested by the state board and the DOE. Right now, legally, for all contracts under $50,000, the state school superintendent can do it. Well, just him. So they had to chase him down all over the place to get him to sign that contract, literally to be the signature. So this just simply says the CFO of the state DOE can execute the contract. It's still the state superintendent's responsibility. He's got to answer for it if it's a bad contract or whatever. Just allows him to sign the paperwork. It's just, again, making their life a little bit easier. Section 21 is yet another curriculum versus standards. I feel like Terry England, by the way, with my jars, my things of water here. I will not take as long as Terry. Section 22 looks like we're adding this big, hairy monster of a process. Let me tell you where this came from. Currently, the state board does hundreds of student waivers that are requested by local districts for a variety of things, usually graduation requirement. They came in from Vermont or something and had a different kind of class, and they're just trying to figure out how to get these kids graduated with some minor technicalities and getting waived. And they had to follow the Administrative Procedures Act, which goes to the Secretary of State, and they had to post on the Secretary of State's website, but they couldn't put the student name out there, so they were just putting out a number and all this stuff, and it was a bunch of extra pain in the butt. So what they asked is, hey, let's still have the same process, but let's get it out from the APA and make a parallel process. So what Ledge Council did is basically copy the Secretary of State APA relevant parts of the process, put it in, and the state board gets their own, keeps them able to do it. Still has transparency, all the due process, it just keeps them from being tangled up in the APA. That would be section 22. Section 23 is a clarification about what capital outlay means, and it clarifies that it involves computer equipment and operating software. Obviously, we're encouraging technology more and more now, and clarifies what the capital outlay expense is. 24, you've seen it and you see it again. We're just changing curriculum to standards. All right, section 25 is related to the testing program being done by the state board, and we do have a relevant part of the amendment in this one as well. And actually, we have two amendments in this area. So if you look at 552 through 556, the intent there is that the state used to fund more nationally norm reference testing, and they've not been able to fund it recently. And it's still aspirational that we do national norm reference testing, like Iowa's test of basic skills and things of that nature. So my amendment, there was some heartburn about that. So my amendment is going to leave that language in there, just cross out with state funding, which basically means the locals can certainly do it. We're aspirational. Maybe one day we'll be able to put state funding back in there for that if that's part of the program. So basically section 25, 551 through 556 will remain the same, other than just crossing out state funding. That's what my amendment does. We, again, does the standards type issue. Lines 564 through 566, I'm not going to discuss the entire issue of the Common Core today, but we are bordering on areas where we will see activity in the other chamber here shortly. 564 through 566 govern the idea that when the department is developing, the state board developing testing instruments, they want to be able to take certain questions, certain features, and make sure they're comparable to other states without having to have the same test and all the sort of entanglements that would require. So it's a very simple question, simple idea. If maybe Virginia, Georgia, Maryland, and California agree to ask the same question 7 times 2 equals blank to a third grader, whatever. And so this allows the state and allows them to do that in the next generation tests. But the language we added in the amendment, which is going to mirror language you will see shortly in Senate Bill 167, is to make it very clear that we're not relinquishing any control of the test to other entities other than the state of Georgia. So if you see my amendment, line 14 through 18, language that no such comparison be conducted which would relinquish any measure of control over assessments individual entity outside the state. You will see that language in other places here shortly. So that's the line 591 is an interesting line. What we have is in the first year of the assessments, as you know, test development is difficult. And in the first year of the assessments, you have bumpy rides sometimes, and getting all the cut scores and all that things done, and also getting the stuff done. And so what this does is basically saying there's an automatic retention clause about not passing the test. If it's the first year of an assessment, we're going to allow a waiver for that in line 591 through 593, which was, again, requested by the State Board of Education. A rewording about how special ed is taught with alternative assessments. It's more reflective of more flexibility on that on 610 through 612. And I think on line 66, we crossed out something that was only up till year 2003, just crossing out dead code. All right, so 25 was a mouthful. All right, so we're going to 26. 26 is another easy one. We're getting rid of the middle grades language, which, again, we don't need that anymore. 27, now we're getting a little bit different. By executive order, the governor moved the Governor's Honors Program administration to the Student Achievement Office and away from the Department of Education. Governor's office requested that we follow that with code to just clean that up. So you will see in 27, we just clean up what the governor did through the budget and through the executive order process. 28, another clarification of curriculum versus standards. 29 is another one of those reports where there was feeling that it wasn't generating as much value, just made it into a may instead of a shall. All right, section 30. Now we're getting into my one of my favorite topics, which is digital learning. Worked very closely with Bob Swigum and the DOE on the Georgia Virtual School, and there's been some very ambiguous situations related to the funding. The old language, if you look on line 800, said at no cost to the student. Well, the Georgia Virtual School is popular, and we have a number of private and homeschool students who've been enrolling. In fact, we have more who want to enroll than there has been money. And so there was a problem because the law said it was free, but then later it talked about tuition, and the law was very conflicting. So we basically revised the law to do what we've done the past 2 years, which is what the appropriations process has provided, which is that if a regular public school kid sitting in a bricks and mortar school wants to take a course from the Georgia Virtual School, his local school system on his behalf pays $250 to the Georgia Virtual School. That was cleaned up in Senate Bill 289 a couple years ago. If a private or homeschool kid wants to take the course, there's going to be a pool provided by the General Assembly through appropriations, and that pool will be used on a first-come, first-served basis, and then after that, the tuition is $250. That's the way we've operated the past 2 years. We just wanted, but it caused a little bit of heartburn on some different folks. We wanted to make sure the code reflected what the appropriations process was doing. Section 31 is just is additional what I was explaining about Representative Costas, Representative I'm sorry, not Senator Rogers. He's gone now, so I don't remember what he was. That just clean up there, and you see you cross out the second process. So you see, like you're crossing out this process of how to publish and do these courses. We're not getting rid of that. We're just again using Representative Costas' process instead. So that would be section 31 and 32. On to 33, there was a report about digital learning, which was supposed to be done by 2012 or something like that. It's already been done, and so just crossing out of the code. 34, 35, your friend, curriculum versus standards. Section 36, this is a request by the department, line 958. Basically, when the homeschoolers have to report their information, I think it's once a year, but at a certain time, we actually went through that whole thing last year about how the homeschoolers report. But basically just adding one thing they have to report is what local school system do they reside in. It's helpful for reporting to know how many homeschoolers we have who are in the Forsyth County system versus the Cherokee County system or whatever it is. There was other language in here around court situation, which turned out to be problematic, and that was struck in subcommittee. So the only thing we're doing there is just adding the local system to the reporting requirement for homeschoolers. All righty, we are 2/3 of the way done, but we got some meaty ones left. Section 37 and 38 were added midway in the process, but it's been a while. It was in subcommittee. Right now, if a local board does not pay its share to the Department of Community Health for the employer share of the health insurance, the law says to withhold the departments would withhold all appropriation. So that's kind of a huge hammer, and you kind of would shut down the school system. So the department was struggling with whether to actually really do this, and we, as you know, we have a lot of school systems really struggling to make the bills paid. So this gives them more flexibility. Basically, it's kind of like, all right, we'll dock your wages what you owe as opposed to everything. This was a negotiation worked out between the department and the DCH and all that, and since it's been in the bill, I've not heard any negative feedback to that. That's 37 and 38. 39 is our eagle-eye. Betsy just happened to catch some dates that were wrong. As you recall, we moved the teacher contract deadline back from April to May a couple years ago, missed a couple of those follow-on dates, and we just fixed those in section 39. Section 40. State board right now gets appeals for disciplinary things and a few things where local board makes a decision, they get to appeal. State board, the current code said the state board had two options, yes, no. They felt that it would be more facilitate better governance and give them better outcomes and things if they had more options. And that's now they can affirm, reverse, remand, local board. I'm not an attorney, it sounds like an appellate court, but they very much believe this will help them and make those processes go through. All right, section 41 is just a technical thing using the code, what a charter authorizer is. A charter authorizer is, who authorizes a charter. It can be the state board, state charter schools, or local, depending on what kind of charter it is. All right, we're now going into the charter territory, section 42. All right, what section 42 does, and there's a mirror in 48 because it's a different part for the state and local, is allows the systems in order to, and this is actually popular with the locals, all the charter authorized on the charter schools. Allow them legally have a method if they have a known successful quantity, a charter authorizer, say like a KIP who's done a good job, and they want to do another school or renew. It allows them to set up a separate process which is more expedited. It allows them to put them in the front of the line for doing that. And so that's what section 42 is all about. Since they're going to be 42A, B, and C, I will now call your direction to the amendment where we're going to be adding some sections. We had started down this path in the original version of this bill and then had to pull it because we didn't want it to be wrong. And Representative Setzer and I have met with state charter schools commissions, met with Lou at the State Department, and have worked out an agreement on how to handle charter applications as far as timelines and shot clocks. So what it boils down to is if you look what 42A, B, and C, I guess there's not a C, will boil down to A and B. What they will boil down to is we're going to have 2 times a year for submission to the local board. You're going to apply concurrently to the local and to the state if you want to. And then there's going to be a sequence of shot clocks. The locals have 90 days, and then the state ends up having 210 days, and then the charter has to be executed by a time. This was all worked out by mutual agreement for that. The reason we want this is because we want to have certainty in the process so that because a charter, especially a charter is new, they're trying to line up. I need to know if I need to go buy the lease on this facility. Do I need to go staff up? All these things. And so if they're in this sort of limbo land with no deadlines, that causes problems in certain cases. So this provides date certain to be a little bit more clarity to the people doing that, so they can do that. Now, we're going to have to get into this when we get into parliamentary procedure, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. We're going to amend the amendment at the appropriate time. And here, the deadlines are referenced as June 1 and November 1. That was supposed to be May 1 and November 1. So at the appropriate time, we will amend the amendment, and someone with Robert's rules will have to help us do that.
I'll get Betsy over here.
So that is sections 42, 42A, and B. Since we're in the amendment, I'll call your attention. Actually, it'll be in section 45, so I'll come back to it later. All right, back to 43 in the regular bill. This is interesting. Charter community has realized that in the current code there was no standard whatsoever for approving a charter. It was like you can just go approve it. Now, by practice, the state board and the state charter has come up with some pretty rigorous criteria, but since the locals were involved too, we wanted to make sure that was a minimum acceptable standard of quality before a charter application was approved. And we negotiated this at great length and made lots of changes, but this was ended up being the consensus for a petition review process, which hopefully will make even more sure that all the charter schools that make it through the process are high quality. That is section 43. Section 44. This and 47 are mirrored. This is an optional thing. It's important to understand this is optional. This is optional. If a charter wants to specify a tiered attendance zone for preference, they can do so. It is possible that certain ways, and I'll talk about tiered in a minute, certain ways of this may very well not allow them to get federal funds. But again, this is strictly permissive. It has no requirement. But it will help encourage some cases where you might have a city-county partnership or things like that, where the city's putting in money, and they want to make sure that those kids get preference. Right now, the only way you can do it is you have one priority attendance zone, and if that doesn't fill up, you have to lottery everybody. And so this gives more options there on 44 and 47. All righty. All right. Section 45 was the big boogie monster in the original version of the bill. It had fairly substantial changes to the local funding formula for charters. That has been stricken. It was in subcommittee. However, in our zeal to strike the funding part of it, the funding formula changes, we accidentally struck what you will find on the amendment, page 4, starting at lines 122. This was in the original version of the bill that went out. It was in the original subcommittee hearing. Again, when we decided we didn't want to change the funding formula, we just struck 45, and then we said, oops, we struck this other part. This part here is related to, and it's revenue neutral. It doesn't change any money at all. It just is, again, it's the certainty factor. If the charter is trying to figure out how am I going to operate next year, what's going on there, it just basically says that when the local system or whoever awards the charter and they're going to fund them at X amount, that they have to live up to that commitment for that term. And then allows in sort of a pre-planning notice in starting 127 that in the April of each year, working on projected enrollment in order to make that initial funding for the charter to be based on that enrollment projections. And if it doesn't meet it, then they'll be docked in their next payment. It doesn't change the revenue. It just allows them to get some certainty and some upfront funding. As you well know, a lot of startup charters, especially the smaller ones, don't have deep bank accounts, and cash flow is a big deal for them, and just make sure that they're able to finance up quickly as they need to. So that's 40. What will be the new 45, but it does not include the changes which were controlling how the locals awarded, the amount the locals awarded for charter schools. So I want to make that very clear. All right, we're back to the main bill in 46. Already have, it's important to know that that this is important to understand what's already in the code. If you look at 1287, each local board of education shall make its unused facilities available to local charter schools. So that's already current law. So we're not trying to add a new thing here. What we're trying to do in 46 is clean up and be a little bit more certainty into that process. So we're defining what an unused facility is. We are, again, being more clear about what the first right of refusal is, and the department is going to help out with this bill and having a database to look at what the unused facilities are. Again, it's very important to understand, constitutionally, the property belongs to the local board. It doesn't force the local board to sell it. It doesn't say, oh, this is unused, you must sell it to the charter school. That procedure is already there. It just basically clarifies the situation and lets the charters be first in line if they're going to do something else with that building. That is 46. 47, I already said, is a mirror on the attendance zone because there's a different chapter for the state and different chapter for the local charters. 48, we're almost to the end, though. See the finish line, Mr. Chairman. 48 is the deadlines, which again we're going to change from June to December. June 1 to December 1 to May 1 and December 1. Also clarifies something that was absolutely the intent in 2012 when we had a big friendly intramural argument about the state charter amendment, which was that any school, doesn't have to be virtual, can request a statewide attendance zone. That was clearly the legislative intent of the author, and when it was not interpreted that way, we wanted to make that clear. Section 49 sounds scary. You know, we're dealing with funding of for the system. If you look at lines 1456, around 5 mil share, what happened was the virtual schools don't get the full amount. They don't get the full QBE. It's done to the state. Virtual schools has done that complicated funding formula we did in 2012, which you all remember fondly. And what happened was originally in the original allotment sheets, the department deducted a full 5 mil share instead of the proportional 5 mil share. The governor funded that and sort of fixed that. Scott at the DOE has said that they fix that process in the future. And so this is just, again, truing up to the way that we're funding what we're doing. And 1470 is also mirror language around the April 1 notification of enrollment in order to get the funding going. All right. Also home stretch, Mr. Chairman. Section 50, this is yet another 501c3. You've seen that we've done a couple of those since I've been in the General Assembly. The State Charter Commission was tasked to do this and part of the creation of them when they did again, back in our friend's House Bill 797, I think it was in 2012. They said they're supposed to set up a nonprofit just to accept donations for their use in order to fund programs or whatever charitable use they want with their schools. But they did not have a physical mechanism to do that. So this gives them the ability to set up a 501c3. And yes, it's true, as we point out, we do have a lot of those around the education in the state, but I figure people donating money towards public education, I don't care where it goes, that's a good thing. Mr. Chairman, that, I believe, is all.
That's an excellent job. I want to say one thing to the committee. Those of you who didn't attend the subcommittee meeting, members of this audience, I wish you could hear the testimony as they spoke, but I have never, in my years of working up here, seen as much information sent out weeks before it was discussed. So everybody, I want to commend my staff over there. The ladies did a fantastic job getting it out, but they had copies, updates instantaneously, and they got it out there. So I want to But I want to say they commended him. They thanked, and this has been discussed, I mean, over and over and over. Every member of this committee, you've gotten copies. This has been in your hands. You're not seeing it today. You've seen it all along. We've sent this to you. I've read this bill many times, and I hope you have seen it, but it's been sent out. We've talked about it. We've talked about it in subcommittee, and everybody's had a chance. I see people nodding out there, so maybe I appreciate that. But I do commend you and thank you for what you're doing. Now, I know now opened up for questions. I can't believe the screen is blank, so anybody want to ask a question?
Everyone's asleep, Mr. Chairman.
They're asleep. That's a good point.
All righty.
All right, number 27, yes, all right. Yes, Representative Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to Representative Dudgeon, thank you for all of your work. Just wanted to ask about the attendance zones for charter schools. Could you explain that process for me? I'm concerned about equity and access. So you mentioned as an example, if a city has a partnership and you wanted to create an attendance zone just for those students who, or a preference for those students who live in that particular area, talk to me about how that currently works and how that ensures equity and access for students who live outside of that city, as an example.
Thank you, Representative. I'm going to, if that's okay with the chair, Representative Setzler, who worked with me most closely on this language. I understand it 99%, but he's going to understand it 100%. So if that's okay with the chair, I can have Representative Setzler answer that.
All right.
It's an important question. We talked about it in subcommittee. What we're doing is we're ensuring that only political subdivisions can be the basis for priority attendance zones. That in the past, in fact, here there have been attendance zones for schools within the APS system that have been drawn based on some neighborhood affiliations that made sense back in the 10, 15 years ago. I think that the department's moving away from just willy-nilly picking neighborhoods that will represent an attendance zone for a charter school. And what this says is that a political subdivision is the only thing you can use for that kind of attendance zone. So if it's a city, if it's a county, if it's it could be a community improvement district, if the CID is going to be sponsoring a charter, it makes sure that only an entity that's already established in Georgia law can be the basis for that. Because our concern is we've seen some requests that, and I mean I've not been on the board seeing them. It's out there in the state that folks have requested some unconventional priority attendance zones that I think raise the eyebrows of some. This ensures that it's only political subdivisions that can be used as the basis for that.
Okay.
I want to. I've got you in order. I'm gonna call on you, but I've had a couple of people. This couple of people say this, and I want to get Representative Dudgeons to respond, and I'll respond to it. But some people have said, and I've had 2 or 3 that there's a lot of information in here. This is huge. This is a huge bill. It's hard to absorb and hard to digest. It's just almost, is it too much for one bill? How would you respond to that, Representative Dudgeon?
That's about as long as House Bill 706 in 2012. With the short session and with a lot going on, we decided to try to and offer to do this is to try to consolidate a lot of stuff, which is what I would say is working operational things of education into one bill. My personal opinion is we're not carving out any grand and glorious, huge new policy here. We are improving on current policies, and basically most of the stuff is a lot of stuff. Most of it is clarifying current policy and maybe adding a little bit more procedure and doing some things. But we're not, if it was carving out what I would call brand new policy elements, that might be better. And of course we have so many, a lot of this is, again, the wording section. The reason the bill's so long is it'd be a third the size if we weren't changing the words curriculum to standards.
Yeah, like that. One thing I want to say too, most of us attended some of these listening sessions, and you remember Senator Tippins always said, and I would say, if there's any superintendent, if there's anyone that has any suggestions, anything they want to eliminate, let us know. We're going to have a Title 20 bill, and we'll try to clean up. So I want to say that, of course, Senator Tippin's been working with us too. I've been real pleased how we've worked on a lot of this information. And so a lot of this stuff is stuff some of this stuff is stuff we received from superintendents, we've received from principals. Matter of fact, I met with some elementary principals the other day and gave us some suggestions. So a lot of this came in and from the State Department. So everybody gave us their ideas. So I mean, it was a lot of work, and we've had a lot of input on it. I want to try to.
One more comment on that. I will say that despite it being in one bill, we've spent an enormous amount of time on each part of it and had a lot of input and a lot of changes. We had 25 changes in the first subcommittee meeting, and so we certainly weren't trying to put one giant bill and rush it through by any means. We still tried to really think about every certain part. We struck whole sections. So I would say that we went through the due diligence, Mr. Chairman.
I'm going to put you on the spot. How many everybody? I better see every hand go up. How many in the audience got a copy of this bill? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Come on, get them up. I know you did, because all of you called me. All right. Number 25. That is okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one of the questions Chairman Setzler just answered that I had, but just a couple more. Just to clarify, Section 5 we're reserving, and that's because the Senate's taking up the issue surrounding the Common Core and the concerns people have about that, and we're going to be seeing that come over.
Yes.
And that's where the curriculum and standard issues is going to be addressed.
Section 5 basically right now says that every 4 or 5 years are reviewing content standards, but it's very, very general, doesn't have a lot of meat to it. And what Senate Bill 167 is going to have a very comprehensive, thorough review process and how standards will be set in the future. And because it was the same code section, the fear is technically the one the governor signs last wins. And we wanted to make very crystal clear that we weren't in any way trying to block that bill or anything like that. And that way, by getting rid of this, the wording that we changed here will be worded similarly, this one small part here, but 141 is being completely rewritten for the most part in Senate Bill 160.
I want to say the House has had a lot of opportunity the last 2 weeks to work with the Senate. I think you're going to see Thursday they're hearing
Tomorrow, I believe.
Tomorrow they're hearing the bill, and we'll be getting it. And I want to assure you, everyone here, that we have been with them every step away in every meeting, working with them, and I think we're going to be very pleased with what we have. I think we're going to, and so we're waiting for it to come out. So I think we'll be very pleased. All right, now number 21. That's all right, Representative Benton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Dudgeons, I appreciate all your hard work on the bill. It is an awful lot to digest.
Yes, sir.
As a former teacher, I always get a little antsy when we start messing around with a lot of this stuff like this. But I'd like some kind of maybe assurance that if it passes the House and goes over to the Senate and they want to add a bunch of stuff to it, that you will turn that down.
You have my word. I do not like Christmas trees. I have no intention of having any substantive changes added on there to this to be a vehicle, so to speak. I don't. You have my word on that, Mr. Chairman.
This will not be a Christmas tree.
No, I'd let it.
No, it is now. Well,
it's our Christmas tree.
This is our Christmas tree.
We pick the ornaments, Mr. Chairman.
We pick the ornaments. All right, Representative Maxwell. You're on. Let's see. Can you turn?
Yes, I am. Okay. Section 46. I'm not very familiar with this section right here.
Okay.
Page 38.
Yes, sir.
Unused facilities. I come from an area where I can't remember in the last 35 years or so we've had an unused facility to speak of. I guess that crops up pretty often in around the state. Maybe we've got unused facilities. My question on this is, and thank you, sir, and everybody that's worked on this bill. This has been just a great task to try to get accomplished, and I appreciate what y'all have done. Are we setting some more what's the word, unfunded mandate for our State Department of Education to try to come up with a database for unused facilities?
They do a little bit
like that.
They keep well, actually, no, we're not commenting on the bill, but my understanding, they keep a facilities database of all the school facilities in the state anyway. That's part of their system that they have.
Yeah.
And I didn't get too much. There was some additional wording in here that was a little bit more onerous on the state board, and in negotiation with them, we did pull that back. So maybe it might be a little bit, but I think because they already have that database, and if the locals let them know, they can just flag it. I'm hoping it's not too big of a deal.
Okay, they didn't have a lot of heartburn.
Well, they did with the original language, and we did push back a good bit of the original language.
So y'all work with them on this portion.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
I think Angela Palm was with us all the way. Communicating on that, weren't you?
Maybe.
Why are you poking the bear out there, Mr. Chairman?
All right, any other question? 27, yes, Representative Morgan.
Just one more. Can we go back over section 25 that has to do with norm reference tests?
Yes, ma'am.
We are not suggesting that districts are no longer going to be taking norm
No, in
reference tests,
fact,
correct?
my amendment will, where you see all that striking of the norm reference test in 552, 556, we're putting that back in my amendment.
Okay, great.
Other than the word state funding, because it hasn't been funded in a while. And again, it wouldn't preclude, I mean, the nice thing about this is it doesn't preclude the state from, through appropriations, funding more in the future, or the state board budget.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, I see no more questions, so I assume that everyone's had their questions answered. All right, Representative Setzler.
Mr. Chairman, appropriate time, I'd like to make a motion.
All right, I see no other questions, so at this time I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to do pass, LC 335528S.
All right.
By committee substitute.
All right, do I have a second? All right, now at this time we have some amendments. So at this time we will take the amendments. amendment, it's an amendment, right?
That's right.
All right,
Mr.
so
Chairman,
Betsy, help us get through this correctly.
I think in my Robert's rules correctly, I'm going to move the amendment, and then I want to amend the amendment, and then we will do that,
that
and then
correct?
we'll move on to happiness. Does that? Two different motions, exactly.
So
So my
you move-
first motion, Mr. Chairman, is to adopt amendment AM 33-1384.
All right, do you hear that? We're talking about, he wants us to amend it with AM 33-1384. Any question, do I have a motion?
I have a motion.
motion. Do I have a second, Do I have a second to that? I have a second. Any discussion to the amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to amend the amendment where,
All right.
on line 24, where it says June 1, to make that May 1.
All right. You see that?
Yes,
It's no objection. Go.
on 154, exactly. And also on 154 of the amendment, May 1.
All right. Do I have a second to that?
Isn't it also 1373 and 1374 in the bill?
In the main bill?
The
The
amendment
amendment replaces those.
The amendment will do that.
Yep.
Do I have a second? Second. All right. Do I have any opposition to the amendment? If not, the amendment to the amendment passes. All right. Now, we have a motion and a second to the amendment. Do I have any opposition to the amendment? If not, it passes. Don't need a vote. Okay. That's right. All right. Now, I have a motion to the main bill as amended. Is that correct? That's the bill is LC 335528S substitute, and as amended. All right. I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor? I want to vote on the indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Like sign. Unanimous. All right. The bill moves. You may go to rules with it now. And, all right.
After Betsy does surgery.
After Betsy does surgery, and well, all right. Now we're going to limit 2 hours on the floor for debate. All right. Now.
Good.
Okay.
Please not.
Now, if y'all can stick around, we're in the home stretch. We got a very important one coming up after this next bill. All right. Number 3 is House Bill 886. Representative Michael Caldwell. Where is my?
There
all
he
right. Good. If you'll come forward, then we're going to hit another one. I need you to stay with me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All I heard there was that my bill is not very important. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. Oh, gosh, I'm sorry. Oh, God. Okay.
No, in all seriousness, thank you for my.
No, wait a minute. The bill of the session is the most important. It's coming up next.
Well, thank you.
I'm sorry. I meant lengthy. That's what I'm talking about. Lengthy.
You can make it up to me with a favorable consideration.
Hey, we'll get. I will move your bill on the floor. Let's get it
Love
going.
it. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for
That was a bad statement. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you very
son.
much. Thank you to the committee members. Thank you, Representative Dudgeon, and to the members of his subcommittee yesterday for favorably considering. This is a very simple bill, so I will not take nearly as long as Representative Dudgeon just did. This is it's a transparency bill. In the state of Georgia, we require certain levels of transparency of any local government that we're going to grant funding to. Cities, counties, et cetera, are all required to hold public hearings prior to passage of a budget. With local school systems and charter schools, we require them to hold public hearings, the local school districts, if they're raising the millage rate and in no other situation. So all this bill would do, it does 3 things. It requires 2 public hearings of local school districts or or any charter school prior to the passage of a budget. Requires they post summary budgets of their proposed budget and their accepted budget online on a publicly accessible portion of the website. And it requires that they make their line item detailed budget available to any taxpayer who requests it within 3 days of the request electronically. These are already accessible, or these are already prepared documents. They're not having to go to any extra work to go prepare these. They just have to provide them. To give you an idea of how simple the bill is, in about 5 lines we run through definitions between 12 and 17. 18 to 21 we deal with the public hearings requiring 2. 22 to 25 we deal with the summary budgets, and then 26 to 29 we deal with the request of a full line item detailed budget, and that is the entirety of the bill. So I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you might have, and I would ask for the members' favorable consideration.
All right. I'd like to ask Representative Dudgeon, in your committee, was his original bill changed any? Was it what were some of the comments in the committee that for the full committee to hear? All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, by the way, we did recommend do pass. The committee made a couple amendments. One was a technical amendment on how the definition of local education agency was to be defined on line 16. There was a substantive amendment on line 26 to require that the bill says you have to have the summary online on their website, and if you wanted a request of the full line item, to make sure that was deliverable in an electronic copy, that someone could get an electronic copy and not a paper copy. Again, at no cost. So the amendment was to make an electronic copy there. And it was pointed out that this does apply to local boards, and it does apply to independent local charter schools as well.
Was there any concern by any
No,
expressed by any member, any
it
group?
was well received, Mr. Chairman.
All right. All right, I have several questions for you, sir. So, Caldwell, so first of all is Representative Maxwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm trying to remember back. It's been a long time ago, but it seemed like we require the local boards to do this already. Is this not something that has been done?
We do require public hearings in one situation, and that's if they're raising the millage rate already. And that we would require 3 public hearings, but outside of that.
Okay, for millage rates we had to do it. I was
Exactly.
thinking there was something we had to do on local boards, but this is going to require every budget year they have 2 hearings.
Right, which we already require public hearings of cities and counties and every other political subdivision of the state. This is the only place that we don't do that, so we're just extending best practice from
And
other
in the past, the
areas.
charter systems didn't have to, I mean, the charter schools, they didn't do any of this?
Right.
Okay.
This applies to all charters and all okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. Is that it, Representative Maxwell? Yes, sir. Okay. Next is Representative, let's see, Dixon. Representative Dixon.
Thank you. If you could explain to me how we're going to handle the statewide virtual charters.
The statewide virtual charters, it's a great question. The concept is any individual charter, so if it's a statewide virtual charter, they're still going to have to hold 2 public hearings. And my guess would be that'd be in a central location. And the beauty of the bill is that the idea is simplicity, so allow them the flexibility to decide where that needs to be held. But the rest of it's all done digitally. So it's online availability of the summary budgets, and then it would be electronic, which requires online requests for the line item budget. So this shouldn't cause any issue with a statewide virtual.
But if I'm a statewide charter and I really don't want to, this is a problem for me. I just schedule my charter in Dade County, and that's not a negative for Dade. It's because it's
Sure.
In the corner.
because you got to go through Tennessee to get to it. Or some other similar on the edge of the state when it makes it very difficult for anybody to get to.
It's a very fair objection. It'd be a friendly amendment to me if you'd like to say that this has to be held in the central office of whatever the local governing authority is. I mean, however you'd like to fix that, I think that's a fair objection.
Well, I'd give you an amendment if I could think of it. Pardon?
You want me to have Betsy move up here right now?
Well, I can move over next to
Okay,
Betsy.
okay, you get next. Betsy.
I guess here would be where my thought goes to that is how do we require them to hold the 3 public hearings as it stands if I guess they're not raising millage rates. So. Right. So they're not. They're,
right.
Which again brings back to me the all the more important that we bring in a public hearing requirement.
Okay. All right. Next is Representative Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Perhaps we could do an online public hearing for the virtual school. That might address that concern, but that wasn't my question. So I'm a co-sponsor of this bill, and I am happy about it. I just want to make a comment, which is we heard some testimony in the hearing that for each individual local school, this would not be feasible because districts may not have the capacity to do that. And I want to say that at some point I would like for us to, as a state, to move to that place. Because as a parent, I would like to know how funds are actually used at the local school level, how that impacts my child. So I don't know if that will happen as districts move to a charter system and there's a more local governance model, but I think as public policy, I'd like to see us move to that place where parents can have that much transparency and see at a local school level how those funds are used to impact their own children.
Okay. All right. Next is I have Representative Glanton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I like the bill. One of the questions I have, and help me understand this, there are some charter schools, LEA and conversions right now, that still fall under the budgetary process of the district.
Yes, sir.
In that case, would that charter school be required to have separate public hearings from the district who've already had public hearings based on this requirement, and theirs is covered under that budgetary process?
You're touching on the core question of the bill that we've come back to several times, so you're on the right track. First version of the bill that I brought forward would have required separate hearings. The substitute that I presented to the subcommittee yesterday exempted locally approved charters that fell under the school district, and the subcommittee, the will of the subcommittee was that we pull them back into it. The idea being that you get further transparency because there's extra funding mechanisms that work for the locally approved charter. They're getting funding from separate places than just the school district. It allows you to access to their individual financials as well, in addition to the overarching public school district's financial documents. So the idea was to lean in favor of more transparency.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Representative Tanner.
I actually talked to Chairman Dixon. I was just going to also point out when he's doing his amendment that we need to make sure that we specify, because there's an advertising requirement for these public hearings. We need to make sure we take that into consideration with the charter schools, statewide charter schools. But I think he's going to do that.
Okay. That's a great point. Thank you.
All right, now that's all the questions I have. Anybody else? Oh, I have one more. Representative Dixon.
Just would say that Betsy has an amendment when we're ready for it. I think it will cover
what we want.
Both the meeting site and the advertisement requirement.
Okay. What I will do, I will take a motion, since there are no more questions, to be properly, follow proper procedure. I will take a motion on the bill, and then we will offer amendments. So do I have a motion on the bill? I have a motion, do pass. I have a second. Now, I have an amendment. So at this time, Representative Dixon, I will entertain the amendment from you. And I will entertain Betsy. All right, Betsy.
All right, so we're going to insert a sentence, or the proposal is to insert a sentence on line 20 after the word requirement period. So it'll say, and that's the sentence that requires the two public hearings. So the new sentence will say, a charter school with a statewide attendance zone shall conduct one such public hearing in the county of the location of its primary business office, and one such hearing in the metro Atlanta area. And then the next sentence is currently in the bill talks about open and public meetings, and that'll address where the advertisements are. So we've now identified the two counties in essence of the two locations.
Is that? Okay.
That's exactly what I was.
I thought you did a good job on that. I appreciate that. All right, you hear the amendment. Do I have a recommendation for the amendment? A motion on the amendment? I have a motion, and I have it moved, and a second. Any objection? All right, the amendment passes. Now we go back to the original bill, which is LC substitute LC 335556S as amended. All right, I have a motion and a second as amended, correct? All right, all in favor of the bill, please indicate by saying aye. All opposed? All right, the bill passes. It's yours. Go to rules, and we'll look for you on the floor. Thank you so much.
Chairman.
Is this your first bill?
This is my very first
Hey,
one.
good job, good job, good job, good job. I handled it well. All right, let's go now to, I'd like for us to go now, if we could, Representative Welch. If see here, is Representative Welch here, Andy Welch. Okay. I'd like for us to go, we will be looking at, now where you'll know, House Bill 802 and House Resolution 1109. I guess you're doing 802 first, Andy, is that correct? Representative Welch?
I'll do the resolution first, if that's
Yeah, that's right, the resolution first, that's correct, because others enabling. All right, 1109 we'll be doing, and I understand in your folders, help me out, Representative Welch, there are 4 amendments, is that correct, or is it 5 or 6?
5.
5 amendments. So everybody, if you would, Representative Welch, help us to be sure we have the right number, so you walk us through it so that everybody can get everything together.
Yes, sir, I will. You should have before you, in terms of amendments, AM 331382. That has my name at the top of it.
1382.
Yes, sir.
All right.
AM 331385. That has my name at the top as well. AM 331386. It has Representative Chandler's name at the top. Then AM 331381 and AM 331383.
Everybody have that in order where nobody's confused. Everybody have that. You should have 5 amendments, and you should have the bill. And if you would, Representative Welch, one more time for everyone, go over the amendments, the numbers, one more time, where they get them in that order.
Yes, sir, I will. First one, AM 331382, AM 331385, AM 331386, AM 331381, and AM 331383.
That's right. Okay. And now we're looking at House Bill 802, the substitute. Am I correct?
This is the subcommittee substitute to House Resolution 1109.
1109, all right.
And reason why I would cover the resolution first is this would be the constitutional amendment that we would need in order to do the enabling.
Okay, and what is your substitute number? Be sure everybody has the right number.
LC 335544S.
All right, everybody okay with everything? All right, you may proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That came out of what committee, may I say? Was that your committee, Representative Dudgeon, or yours?
The illustrious Dudgeon Committee.
All right, what was your recommendation of that committee, Representative Dudgeon?
That again was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, but we did recommend do pass on both 1109 and 802.
All right. Okay. Now this bill, I want to say, committee members, we will because of the numbers changes. I did promise the audience that I would allow a little conversation and a statement. And I have 4 people signed up to speak on this piece of legislation, so we will allow that after questions from the committee. Take about 3 people signed up to speak. Okay, go ahead.
The longer we're here, will you just keep knocking the list down? Is that what?
Sounds good. That's good.
The first one, the House Resolution 1109. This is a proposal to amend the Georgia State Constitution. In particular, to amend the current paragraph that deals with the educational local option sales tax. This amendment, the heart of the amendment is on page 2. It's on line 40. And as you already know, the East Bloss money, the 1-cent sales tax that is already existing in the state of Georgia and may be implemented by local decision making, that 1-cent sales tax allows for paying off debt and building capital improvements, or capital outlay is the actual language in the Constitution. In addition to that, on line 40, I'm proposing that we amend the Constitution, or at least put to the voters for an amendment of the Constitution, an allotment for a portion of the 1-penny sales tax for educational programs and materials, provided, however, that this shall not include maintenance operation unless specifically authorized by the General Assembly by law. That is the heart of the constitutional amendment, to expand the use of the penny for educational programs and materials, which we would define in House Bill 802. Under that, you'll see that we've made the adjustments in the language of the Constitution to correspond to the insertion of educational programs and materials. Lines 49 through 53, this is where the cost of the program, educational programs and materials, cannot exceed 50%. So you can only allocate half of the penny at a maximum if you're a local school system and is approved by referendum by the voters. So a maximum of 50%, half the penny could be used for these educational programs and materials, not the full penny. The other languages are the languages to address just editing. On lines 86 through 90, this is where the school system is authorized to amend its current eSPLOST within a 2-year period after adoption and enactment by the people, it would allow for a window so that current eSPLOS that exists can amend them by referendum. They have to go back to the voters, propose what those new educational materials and programs will be, put that to the voters, and offer it to them to vote on to approve as an amendment to their current eSPLOS. That would allow jurisdictions that are struggling presently and have been struggling for 5 to 6 years now on trying to provide additional financial assistance to some of their operations, and it would allow them to apply some of that money to those programs currently and then going forward, which hopefully will be a relief to some jurisdictions that are struggling financially through this recession. That is the heart of H.R. 1109, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to take questions on that.
Isn't it true, of course, that as we held our 8 listening sessions throughout the state, that this was one of the top, well, we had 6 items that we listed that the superintendents wanted, and this was one of the areas they wanted. What we thought was very interesting, last year we proposed this, and there was some kickback because we found some misinformation that superintendents and boards had. They, as you remember, they didn't necessarily trust the state. They thought this was just a ploy maybe to stop state funding and get them to do more. And so there was some kickback last year when we had introduced this type of legislation. But overwhelmingly now, and I've gotten lots of emails, a lot of comments, they would like this flexibility. And we are moving. And one thing we talked about, moving toward local control, local flexibility, local decision making, and this will just give them another option. They don't have to do it. It's up to them. You need to know this is a constitutional amendment. It will require 120 votes from the House to even get out. So that's what this is. So I'll take some questions for you now. Representative Dixon?
Of course, I've had some reservations, not about the concept, but about how it may impact some school systems. But it just dawned on me, because this doesn't enable a system to levy a fractional value.
No, sir.
It means if you are in a system that, at least at the current time, has no capital need, you can't do this.
That's correct.
Or you're going to create some capital needs so that you can get that other half penny.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Yes, sir. That's exactly what the legislation does. You would not have that option to use half the penny for those purposes. You would need to have some capital outlay maintenance that needs to be performed on capital structures and buildings that in order.
Are we creating incentive to find some capital needs?
I think that would be possible if a system, if the only purpose that they're levying it is for the educational programs and materials, then certainly. I think that's the point of obviously the amendment is to allow those local jurisdictions to make a decision as to what their needs may be. If they don't have that need, then they also will need to answer to the voters for why they're building an Olympic-sized swimming pool if that is not necessary or needed by the educational jurisdiction. Most likely the referendum would fail. So I think that's the ability. So all we're doing is creating the flexibility of the existing current eSPLOS to allow for this new educational purposes, and that's the point of the bill or the resolution.
I mean, I don't have an answer to that, but I think it's going to create a question at some point from systems, and there probably aren't a lot of systems out there that don't have some building need, but we're getting to the point with the number of years that we've had eSPLOS out there now that we're getting caught up a little bit on major capital projects. So.
Good point. All right, other questions? Other questions? You have no other questions, but you've explained it very well. I guess the amendments are all to this 802 though. So this we just need to adopt this now. We don't need no amendments to this one, right? All right. So at this time, I will entertain a motion for House Resolution that we are considering now, House Resolution 1109, a substitute House Resolution 1109, LC 335544S. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion to pass. Do I hear a second? I have a second. Any questions? Now I'm going to take some comments from the audience. I messed up. I should have done this earlier. I want to ask Chuck, Angela, and do y'all want to comment on this one or is it the next one? Anybody want to comment on this one? Anyone? I thought it was the next one because you said that, so I wanted to be sure. All right, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. Okay, it passes. All right, now let's move on to 802, all right?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 802, you have the substitute. It's LC number 335534S. This is a substitute from the subcommittee. And in this legislation, what we're doing is spelling out exactly how the East Blos money could be applied for educational purposes and materials, programs and materials. So what, and you should have in your folder, if you do not, you should have a summary of both of these bills that I provided to you on 1109 and a summary on 802. The first page gets right to the heart of 802, and of course I go into more detail with each section on the second page. Let me just go right to the heart. If you will turn to the bill, page 3 in the bill, beginning on line 71, you'll see the code section of 48-8-141. This is the new definition section, and in here is where we define educational programs and materials to mean A through P. So those are all of the expressed uses. And you'll see, just for example, the first one is security personnel, supplies, and equipment. As we have seen a greater unfortunate reality that there's more gun violence, there's more aggravation in school systems. We're seeing with children with weapons. I think just the other night we had someone that was selling guns outside of a campus within a school zone. The enhancement for school security may be something that's very much desired, but may not be able to be funded by many local school systems presently. Also, technology personnel, as we keep moving progressively into a more digital age, these tools for classroom teaching are becoming more expensive, and they often need to be replaced on a more quick basis than just 5 years, just because technology expires quite rapidly. Programs and softwares also can expire, and the licensing for those things can be expensive for an entire school system. So to advance the education of our students, school systems, I believe, are finding themselves hamstrung, frankly, in terms of wanting to provide an exceptional education to our students, but at the same time not having the funds because of the loss of property values across the state. And this has constricted their cash flow. This would allow them to utilize some of this up to half of the 1 cent sales tax for any of the items that you're seeing here below. It's my intention that what we're doing is providing funding for various programs and materials that are ancillary to the core education that children are receiving in the state of Georgia, but unquestionably would provide a better education if those subject areas, if those materials can be provided. So that is the intent of this list. And actually it's remarkable that over the course of this bill has been out there, and I have done my best effort to make sure that I communicated the bill to anyone and everyone that asked me about the bill and provided them with the substitutes on a regular basis as well as the amendments. It's amazing that there's only one amendment that you have before you to amend the list. And I find that remarkable, and that was just Ms. Chandler's recommendation 2 days ago. So it tells me that, at least in terms of those that have taken the time to read and review the bill and the list, that this list is hitting the mark. And we've covered the things that are necessary to improve the education. But if an East Blos is not approved, and it has been put forth to the voters that they wanted to spend, the Board of Education at that time wanted to spend money on any one of these items, and for some reason that is not approved after it has been in place for a period of time, for a 5-year period. And as you know, East Blos can actually be shorter than 5 years. So if that time period is expired and it is not renewed, the next round is not renewed, you may lose these programs. And that is a risk that the local jurisdictions take. They accept that responsibility. They accept that risk. But in doing that, what you're doing is you're not losing your core subject areas, you're not losing your core personnel that's a part of the teaching staff, and it does not fund administration. So those are some key aspects of this that I wanted to underscore for the committee as it makes its policy decision. In addition, you'll see the very last lines, 90 and 91, educational programs and materials shall not include general maintenance or operation cost. So you've got to specify to the voters what it is you want to buy, what personnel you need in addition to what you're already providing. We have a lot of bills that we've seen in the last 3 years that I've been in the General Assembly, 4 years now, that we're seeing more and more nursing requirements being placed on systems. I have a system in Butts County that has one nurse for 5 schools. She has to travel around to the school systems. How effective is that going to be when a child goes into an epileptic seizure or has a reaction to an allergic reaction? There are some serious questions. We're passing bills, and we, in many regards, we're not, I think, addressing some funding issues that go along with some of these permissive legislation that we're passing. So we've addressed that in line 83 with medical personnel, supplies, and equipment being included. I hope you'll find that the list is satisfactory. In addition to that, we've made numerous changes throughout the bill, throughout the current legislation, to make it comport more with the local option sales tax, county local option sales tax, to mirror that language, because that would help DOR with its administration of the provisions here. So we've tried to do that. We've been consistent with the existing law while augmenting it with the current county local option sales tax law. And I'll be happy to take any questions at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any questions from the committee before I have some comments from the audience? All right, Representative Dudgeons, and then I have Representative Nix, all right?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's actually more of a comment than a question. It's interesting to me, looking at the list you came up with, is kind of the things that generally get cut in a tough budget environment, and giving more flexibility. And I always like things what I call the Kroger test. And if you're standing in the checkout line at Kroger and you have somebody come up to you and say, why do I have a $40 million school and you're cutting the art program because the budget is tough? There's a disconnect here. And again, what the chairman said, giving some flexibility, especially in these specific items, which are the kind of things that get cut in a tough budget environment, I think is a good thing. And thank you for bringing the bill.
Representative Nix.
Thank you. You mentioned 50% or something. Is there a specific limit to what can go to these items? Is it in the bill? I couldn't find it.
No, sir, it is not in 802. It is limited by the constitutional provision in the Constitution. The amended Constitution, if it passed, would be to 50% maximum, and that is a deliberate intention on my part, so that jurisdictions will not try to expand programs beyond what is needed and what would be beneficial, just to hire folks on and then have them lost later on if the East Bloss was not approved later on by the voters. So the cap is actually in H.R. 1109.
Okay.
All right, Representative Dixon.
Just for clarification, I wanted to be sure where you've got a county system and independent school system. I know it's covered in here, but does that allow them to differentially apply this? In other words, the county system still needs all theirs for capital projects. The city system wants to split it. That is covered, I hope, right?
The current law is such that they
develop their separate lists.
They develop separate capital outlay list, and they also it's combined on the same ballot, but the lists are different by each of the independent schools. Right. And furthermore, a school system actually could be just wanting to refund and pay off the debt, general obligation debt, and that could be one item that applies only to the independent school system, whereas the county may need buildings. So.
I just want to be sure that
that was a question. You remember I think you were there that first meeting. We were concerned. They had some things taken to give that back. What you're saying, where locals they could the city systems and the local counties could be separate. Yeah. All right. I see no other questions. So at this time, I'm going to allow comments from the audience. At this time, Chuck Clay, and on deck would be Angela Palm. So Chuck.
I'll let Angela go first, but I really want to address simply one of the amendments. I don't know if you want to hear those first or.
Well, what we do, I will allow you to address one of the amendments when I get to each amendment. So if you want to address amendments, you can. So Angela, and on line Sean Adams. Where's Sean? All right, you're next. So on deck.
Okay, I think we're all going to address the same amendment. And the amendment number is AM 331381. While you're finding that one, I will say that GSBA stands neutral on House Bill 802 and the constitutional amendment. Our members have never come to agreement on a position on expanding the possible use of a SPLOST. This amendment that you have before you, 331381, calls for a notification of the city or county and a meeting to discuss possible implications of the SPLOST. And we certainly strongly support intergovernmental cooperation. We encourage our members always to work with their cities and counties across the board on issues, but we oppose this amendment. First of all, in practical terms, when a SPLOST is called, they may or may not know where new facilities will be placed. They may or may not have a site design. So if you don't know yet where the new facility would go or what the traffic flow would be in and around it, then it's kind of hard to sit down and talk about the traffic implications of using the proceeds of the SPLOST. The other reason that we oppose this is that we have numerous places in a state statute that just in the course of their daily business, cities and counties have the authority to do a number of things, make a number of decisions that do affect school districts, but are not required to notify them or to discuss that with them, including zoning decisions, annexation, calling for Freeport exemptions, tax abatements, tax deferrals, a whole litany of things. While I believe it might be good policy to require everybody to sit down and talk, we need to look at all of those code sections together and work out an amicable procedure on all of those things where the work of one entity affects the other. Thank you.
Sean?
Let him have
Oh, Chuck, okay.
Let him have the last word. Thank you, Chuck Clay, Georgia Education Coalition. And I wanted Angela to go first because that way he can limit having to hear much from me. And that's a blessing to all. But addressing basically the same amendment, Mr. Chairman, I mean, it's hard again to argue against the policy of communication and cooperation. Obviously, that should occur, and I hope I can't imagine in any jurisdiction there not being some. But there is always a bit of angst, and Gwinnett County, Mr. Chairman, your home area was one that had concern that, one, you may be creating a legal mandate that inadvertently creates legal challenges or legal problems if there's not specific compliance, and then you get into a morass out there that certainly is an unintended consequence. Again, my friends at the ACCG are honest, I think, in the attempt to try to ensure that impacts are discussed across governmental lines. But as a pragmatic term, and one of my earlier permutations in life, I was a county commissioner, and I know the frustration that we occasionally had when we were presented bills on all the everything that looked like asphalt and tar and guttering and sewering and curbing that was all the interest and egress from a brand new school, and we felt like we got handed the bill, and I get it. But the law is very clear, and it's very clear for, I think, a very specific reason. There's just a very finite demarcation between what SPLOST dollars can be spent for, educational purposes only. It doesn't make folks happy, and I do. There is some concern that you may create the perception or the idea that this really is about getting more money from school systems to help pay for transit and transportation to and from. It's a natural tension, again, because I've been on the shoes of the county commissioners when we got presented those bills. But I think the law is very clear. There's no confusion. And I think the best policy is ensure that we don't muddy those waters with the best of intentions. Thank you, sir. Thank you, committee.
I see no questions for you. All right, Sean? Did I get that right?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Please tell us where you're from and who you're with. And
Sean Adams with ACCG, Georgia's County Association. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. I'd just like to first respond to what Chuck Clay said and Angela Palm. First off, I do want to be clear that what we're trying to do here is not to get the eSPLOST dollars to be spent on these projects, on these transportation projects. We understand the law is clear on that. Matter of fact, I believe Representative Dixon and the subcommittee brought up the fact that in order to do so, that would have to be a part of the constitutional amendment, which would be in the resolution as well. We are simply looking at current SPLOST law. This is the same meet and confer language that is used in SPLOST law with city and county government whenever they communicate on projects and their referendums. And all it is doing is asking the local school board to communicate with the city and the county when these projects are going to require transportation improvements. Ms. Palm made a good point. If they do not know at that time, I mean, this is meant to be a friendly amendment. If there's some language as such that can be specific to when they know that these improvements are going to be necessitated, because that's really what this is about now. If you look at the amendment, if it's not going to require at the time prior to the referendum a transportation improvement, then arguably that meet and confer would not be required. Our goal here on the transportation side from a county budget standpoint, GDOT recently changed their LMIG program, Local Maintenance Improvement Grant Program. These kind of projects, XL, decel lanes, turn lanes, right-of-way acquisition, curb cuts, these are the kind of projects that the LMIG program, the county and cities rely on to use. If we know on the front end and are timely with our knowledge of these projects being necessitated by a capital outlay project from an eSPLOS, then we can plan accordingly in our budget. We can plan our project list as it relates to LMIG and what we put forward to GDOT for certification. We can plan that accordingly and make sure that not only are these projects done, but the local governments can also continue to take care of the priority that they have with their projects that aren't specific to the school. This doesn't give the county or the city any ability to deny or try to prevent them from being able to carrying through with this. This simply just says, please let us know on the front end so that we can plan accordingly and budget. And if you notice the actual date, time, place, and purpose, the school board actually gets to control all of that. As long as they give us 10 days notice and it's 30 days prior to referendum, again, the same as the current SPLOST law. If the county and city chooses not to meet, there's no requirement that they go any further.
You have a question, if you don't mind. Representative Dixon?
Yes, sir.
Coming from a school system that got hit with a $3 or $4 million loss of revenue because of what a county board did without any notice, what if we amended this to take in her things and said that every time the county board or city council was going to change traffic flow or
build subdivision,
zoning, change any of the tax law that would affect school systems, that they were required to give the same notice and the same meeting requirement?
We're happy to have that conversation. I will say some of the items that Ms. Palm referenced in terms of tax abatements are not always specifically done by the county or the city. Many times they're done by development authorities, where Title 36 actually creates a divide between the county development authority for those purposes, so there's not as much control there. On any items that are germane to this eSPLOS that relate to that and what Ms. Palm said, I'm happy to have that discussion regarding an amendment.
Well, I suggest that we hold that amendment then until you have that discussion.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
The response to that is many of those items are actually in different code sections, and my understanding would not be germane to this legislation. So we would like to have those discussions on other matters as they progress. But this does not come around every day in terms of looking at eSPLOS, which is why we wanted to bring that for you at this time. And again, if these projects aren't necessitating a transportation infrastructure improvement, then there's no need for the meet and confer.
Thank you. Any other questions? I have no other questions, so thank you so much. So if I could ask the author of the bill to please come forward. Ladies and gentlemen, you have on your desk the bill, the enabling legislation. You have 5 amendments. I think Betsy, help me out. I think the posture I need to take a motion on the bill, get a motion and a second, and then we will take the amendments. And I'm not sure what order, so if you could help me there. So at this time, I have question number 28. That's Representative Nix.
Real quickly, before we get ready to vote
Yes,
on the bill, I want to ask a quick question. In the list of things that can be funded, would you be open to the idea of adding to that CTAE equipment?
I'm sorry, Representative Nix, I'm not familiar with the abbreviation.
Career Technical Agricultural and Engineering
Oh,
Studies.
Sorry.
Really, it's our development, workforce development.
I wanted to put all these amendments to you. This is the policy-making body for education in the State House.
The gentleman has a right to make that amendment if he would like.
I would think it would not adversely affect my intentions with the bill, and as long as it, obviously is not perceived as a poison pill to the bill, which I don't think it would be.
No,
it's not. It's a great amendment. Great amendment.
I would throw that out.
Well,
to see if the
you have the
committee
right. You have the right at the proper time.
agrees to that. Oh well, I'm good then.
Well, we'll go at the right. You have the right at the proper time.
But the reason I mentioned that is that those were some areas that got cut extremely heavily as we went through this process.
Well, that's the point of the bill, is to try to restore some supplemental funding while we're in this low time of property values. So that makes sense.
That's a great. You have the right. I will call it. All right. So at this time, I will entertain a motion. Now we're looking at. Remember, everyone, the bill. We're looking at substitute to House Bill 802-3355-34S. I entertain a motion at this time. I have a motion to do pass. Do I have a second? I have a second. At this time, we will consider the amendments. Betsy, please help me out. Is there any order? Can I just take them in the order I want? I will choose to do that then. All right, and Representative Welch will take Amendment 33-1382. Will you please? That's your amendment.
Yes, sir. This is an amendment at the request of the school boards and the superintendents. It was a clarification that we needed to make sure existed within this bill, resulted at subcommittee or discussed at subcommittee. The amendment would identify on lines 18 through 20 of the amendment that, and clarify that East Bloss, if you're going to use the East Bloss money, would not factor in and adversely affect you in your equalization allocations. And this was raised by the subcommittee, raised by concerns of folks in the education arena. So I've crafted this legislation with the great assistance of Ms. Howerton, and so I would offer that up as an amendment to the bill, but I wanted to make sure you saw it before.
Okay. I have a, all right, Representative Dudgeons.
Yeah, just to be clear, so this basically says that they're not going to get dinged off their equalization because they're using some of this money in the specific purposes. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Right.
Then I will motion this amendment, Mr.
I have a motion from him. That's your second. All right, second. I have a motion and second for this amendment. Representative Dudgeons, and who seconded it? Representative Kaiser. Any discussion? Any objection? So passed. All right, let's go to amendment. Well, Representative Welch's amendment, AM 33-1385. So if you'll please explain your amendment.
This is actually kind of a hyper-technical tax amendment under the current, on lines 106 of the bill. There is, currently there exists just a reference to Article 1. It really should be Article 3 of the chapter. And when you reference Article 3 of the chapter in which this appears, which is local option sales taxes, there isn't any need to repeat lines 108 through 111. That language is already in the Article 3. So this is really more of a cleanup than it is. There's no substantive change to it. It's just a cleanup of the bill. And if it passes, that's great. If it doesn't pass, it doesn't adversely affect the bill.
Would you mind, Betsy? Would you recommend that?
Yes.
Would you make a statement to us?
Well, we had Rick Russell in our office that does all the tax work look at it, and he said this would be a better way of stating it, and it would actually kind of change with any changes in the law more easily than the original version. So it is intended to accomplish the same thing, but apparently it's a cleaner way to do it.
All right. Well, thank you. All right. Do I have a motion on the amendment? I have a motion and a second. Do I have a second? I have a second. Any objection? I hear none, so amendment is approved. Representative Chandler is offering, so if you just stand up there, is offering an amendment, Amendment AM 33-1386. Representative Chandler?
Mr. Chairman, may
Yes,
I
sir.
just make a suggestion? Because I think we could do two things in one
All right.
one amendment if we could. And what I thought we would do is to incorporate both
Representative
Dixon's and Representative Chandler's in the same motion. And if I might just spell it out as I would see it.
Well, why don't you offer an amendment to the amendment at this time then? Let me get a motion on this amendment.
Okay.
I have a motion on the amendment, do I? Do I have a second?
The Chandler's amendment?
On the Chandler amendment, do I have a motion? Have a second? All right, so go ahead and offer your amendment to the amendment.
Yes, sir. Because we already have in the current bill 802 as the sub, you have A through P, and you're essentially, what Chandler's amendment does is it consolidates G and H, where it says graduation and career counseling. Those are two separate lines. So my thinking is, her intention is to have counseling personnel, supplies, and equipment, which would incorporate graduation and career counseling and any other counseling that services that may be provided. So my thought was to on line G, have that just striking graduation and capitalize counseling. And then on line H, insert the language that Representative Nix was proposing there for the, and I'm sorry, I don't have the acronym. But that way you plug that in right there, and you actually don't have to reformat the bill, and you're taking care of two amendments at once.
Is that okay with you, Representative Nix? Betsy, does that do what we want? That's good, isn't it? All right. Do I have a motion to that amendment to the amendment? I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a question, number 28. That's
Okay.
Who is
So
that? Representative
I
Nix?
just wanted to make sure the wording of my amendment will be CTAE personnel, supplies, and equipment, just as the others read.
Is that right, Betsy?
Right, we'd spell out CTAE, but yes.
He'd spell it out and we'll just say CTA, say what it is. Correct?
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any objection to Representative Nix's amendment to the amendment? So approved. All right. Any objection to, now we're considering Amendment AM 331386, Representative Chandler's amendment that has been amended. Do we have any objection to that? So approved. All right. Next, let's move on. If we could, I have what, two? I want to be sure I've got them all together now. I have.
Christmas tree.
No, we're not building a Christmas tree. Don't say that word.
I have the Christmas tree, Mr.
All right. Now let's go. Be sure I'm right. That's three amendments we've done. We have two left, right?
Yes, sir.
I have the one I have right now is AM 331383. I don't. Whose is that? Is that yours, Representative Welch?
This was just the last two amendments that you see here are just, I wanted to try to translate what the comments were that we received in the subcommittee into amendments for this body to consider if it thought they were appropriate. I'm not personally sponsoring either one of these amendments, but I thought I would translate them. The first one, the 331383. This would just add state charter schools to the list of possible cooperations that can exist between a school board and the special state charter schools or independent schools, and there's a list that's on that particular page, line 93. So that would amend, it would add the definition of state charter schools at line 93 and 94, and then it would add on lines 113. In that section, it talks about local school boards shall be authorized to include local charter schools, state charter, special schools, or both as capital outlay projects as specified on the ballot. This would also allow them to be, if you accept this amendment, it would allow that list to include state charter schools.
Okay. Any questions for the author? All right. Any questions on the amendment now? All right. Okay. 23, Representative Dixon.
I just want to be sure that, from Betsy, that this authorizes but in no way mandates.
Right, yeah, it just authorizes the commission charter schools, just like it does the other variety of charter schools, but it doesn't mandate anything. It actually just tracks what's in the Constitution already.
Good. All right, you got the answer. Do I have a motion on the amendment AM 331383 to approve? Have a motion? I see a move. Do I have a second? I have a second. Anyone object? So approved. Our last amendment now is AM 331381. Representative Welch, is this yours also?
Well, I did prepare it as a response to the comments that ACCG has raised earlier. They approached me with a request that there be a meet and confer addition to 802. And my response to them was that I would certainly prepare it. I'm neutral on whether it's there or not, and that's the wisdom of this committee, and that's why you have that amendment.
Since you're not sponsoring, I'll need on amendment 33. I'm gonna get some comments. 1381. Is there any discussion?
I have some.
I have Representative Dudgeons would like to make a comment. Oh, I turned you on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was pretty swayed by Ms. Palm here and thinking about it in my school board days. There's 10 times more things that a county can do to a school board than the vice versa. And I'm totally open to a unified, in fact, there's right now with our county and school board, there's some issues right now they're trying to work out and trying to arrange some meetings, in fact. I'm totally open to the idea of doing this, but I'm uncomfortable doing it one-sided right now, kind of at the last minute. But I would give my friends ACCG and the school board commitment that it's a worthy subject to try to get more coordination on these things. But I'm uncomfortable personally right now doing this on its own.
All right.
That's my comment.
Any other comments? All right. I do not have a motion because Representative Welch is not offering it. So do I have a motion for this amendment? Dies for lack of a motion. Thank you. All right. Now we're back to the original bill, and this is House Bill 802. We're using the substitute as amended by, as I look now, four amendments, and it's LC 335534 substitute S. I have a motion and I had a second. All in favor of passing this, please indicate by saying aye. All opposed, please say no. Passes. Congratulations. Go to the rules and get it out, my friend. We need 120 votes. All right. Now, I'm going to tell you, I've been waiting for this for a long time, and I want no one to leave. The most important bill we've taken up this year now is coming up. So, Representative Mayo, you want to stay there or come up and down? Why don't you come on down? We want to look at you. We want you to come on down. This is Representative Mayo's bill. He has been very, very patient. I appreciate him. You know, he didn't get the message last time. All right, House Bill 405. So if you'll pull that one out, House Bill 405.
Great.
Lots of questions. Okay, Representative Mayo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I appreciate the consideration of House Bill 405, which has passed in the subcommittee, and essentially this bill would establish guidelines to create some uniformity with regard to school board training. And currently the law is in place for local school boards to receive and participate in board governance training. And we just want to create the same type of accountability for charter schools. So if you look at Section 1, it establishes that locally approved charter schools will provide initial and annual training conducted or approved by the state board. Section 2 relates to state chartered schools and would require that the State Charter Commission approve or provide initial and annual board governance training for approved charter schools. And finally, in Section 3, the state board would require board members to participate in annual and initial training for board governance. So again, this is something we think would bring some quality and accountability to charter schools, so that we're holding them with the same high regard that we have for our traditional public schools. And with that, I would entertain any questions.
You have tons of questions, so let's see. That was a good presentation. Representative Howard, see what do you have to add to the situation?
Friendly question. What about conversion charter schools that were established?
Right.
Would they be included in this?
The bill doesn't explicitly have any requirements for conversion charter schools, but I'm not sure, Betsy, if they would be considered part of the.
It does. It would.
Okay.
It would.
Okay.
Representative Dixon?
It is kind of silent on who's going to pay for the training.
Yeah, that was.
Unless you assume that when it says that the state board will provide for, but when they also have or approve, then if they're just approving it, who's going to pay for it?
Right.
Betsy will comment. She wants to.
Please.
Yeah, we're silent on that. I mean, obviously, if the state board provides it, then, you know, that they would be doing that. But basically, the requirement is going to be on the board itself. So if there's no place they can get the training, you know, from the state board or otherwise, then they're going to have to be responsible for figuring out how to pay for that. But you know, the state board in approving that training can take that into consideration also, as far as, you know, kind of access to different programs and that kind of thing.
Are we sure we don't want to provide for how it's going to be paid for?
I mean, we can if
That's up to this committee. Representative Dudgeon, what can you add to that? Do you have a question?
I do. I had a couple questions. That was one of them.
Let's go back and sit down. I thought you were going to comment. Okay. And you want to go on push that one, or what do you?
Well, I mean, we I put myself in a bad place here.
You did.
Because I'm not a big proponent of the funding for charter schools, but
you're in charge of appropriations.
We are expecting charter schools to operate on very limited budgets, and to add an additional expense onto them does cause me some concern. Who pays for a local board of education to have their training now?
Local board. And the statute for the local board training is silent as to funding.
Okay.
Okay. And most of their training is done by y'all, isn't it? By the local board, school board.
I got some comments when you're done with that.
All right, Representative Dudgeon, do you have a comment or question?
Yeah, the same question the chairman did. Gosh, I drew a blank there for a second.
Let's get.
I got it. It's not true, Representative Mayo, that the first version of this bill was much more prescriptive with a certain number of hours and a certain number of things, and this version, as it moved through the process, gives a lot more leeway to the state board to figure out the levels and things like that. So, for example, if they wanted to have an all-day seminar where they have, and it's also not true that they do work with a lot of the charter people also anyway to work with them to make sure they got good best practices, and that this training could be provided perhaps at a minimal cost.
That's true, Representative Dudgeon.
Representative Kaiser?
I think Representative Dudgeon's just answered my question. Thanks.
Okay. Is that it? Everyone has spoken that had a question, all right? You hear the bill. We're considering Representative Mayo's bill, which is LC 335484, substitute to House Bill 405. Do I have a motion? I have a couple of moving, all right, to do pass. Do I have a second? I have a second. Representative Dixon, I see you. Okay, good. All right, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. All opposed? Okay, let me say something before everybody leaves. I plan to have some meetings with you next week. I'll be calling you in, talking with you. I'd like to meet with you, just talk to you about some things. Remember, everybody owes $5 to our treasurer here for our dues, and I want you to listen to me very carefully. Next week, I'm not sure when, but we'll probably be Wednesday, but please tell all your friends, we need every education member here for the full, probably hour and a half to 2 hours for a very important meeting that we're going to have. We'll probably be considering a very important bill, wouldn't you think, Representative Dudgeon? Most important bill. Or maybe the next week. We don't know, because we're getting so close, people. We have what left? 8 days to crossover? What's crossover? 8 days? Week from Monday. So y'all bear with us. Thank y'all so much. We adjourn. Thank y'all for being here. I got you.